and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. New Jersey recently lost a longtime member of Congress, Congressman Bill Pascrell. He passed away following a brief illness and was 87 years old. The congressman was an institution of New Jersey politics, serving as mayor of Paterson, a state lawmaker, and then later elected to Congress. But his is not the only loss the state has seen. Congressman Donald Payne passed away back in April. We also have U.S. Senator Bob Menendez, who resigned earlier this month following a federal corruption conviction over the summer. Joining me now to discuss all of this, as well as the legacy of Congressman Bill Pascrell, is David Wildstein, editor of the New Jersey Globe, Joey Fox, a reporter for the New Jersey Globe, and Micah, Rasmussen, who is the director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey politics. Gentlemen, it's so good to see you all here. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks for having us on, Laura.
Absolutely. I mean, what a year it's been. David, let's go ahead. I'm going to start with you. You know, you've covered New Jersey politics for a very long time. You've known all of these people for a very, very long time. Let's first talk a little bit about the most recent loss of Congressman Bill Pascrell. Can you just talk a little bit about the kind of public servant he was?
Yeah, I mean, whether you agreed with him on issues or not, he was one of a kind. He will be, he will have a tremendous legacy, and he was just a man completely comfortable in his own skin. He was scrappy. He was a fighter. He wasn't afraid of anything. He was a model of integrity. He did things his way, and he, I laugh. I've known him 35 years, and I remember when he was first elected to the assembly. People now talk about, well, Pascrell. He's great to he's great to get a quote from because he's completely and totally unfiltered. In his 80s, and the reality is he's been unfiltered his entire life. He was, the Bill Pascrell in his 50s was the same in his late 80s. The guy, he was just authentic. He was real New Jersey. Life will go on, and there'll be a new candidate, to replace him. But there'll never be another person like Bill Pascrell. This is just a guy who loved democracy. He was at his core, he was always where he started, which was a Paterson kid and a high school social studies teacher. And I mean, as recently as last year, you talk to him, and he would, you ask him a question about the Constitution, and you got to sit back because you're facing an entire hour or so of what he had to say. He was always a teacher, and boy, this is probably more than anything else, the man loved Paterson. He was born in Paterson. He lived there his entire life. That city was his entire existence. He was, he spent years and years in public service, and he loved the place, and he fiercely defended it, and he brought money back, and from a personal level, the guy he's just going to be missed by everybody.
Yeah, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
Laura, I'm sorry
Yeah,
to jump in, but
please do.
when you and I first knew him as an assemblyman in the 90s in Trenton, we would ask, because he was one of those dual office holders. He was mayor and assemblyman at the same time. As a young staffer, do you want us to call you assemblyman or mayor? And he's like, well, there are 120 assembly members, and there's only one mayor of Paterson, so you'd better call me mayor. He was very clear on what he was proud of.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Those are such great stories, and you just look back at how time has passed so quickly. Now, Joey, you cover New Jersey's congressional delegation in D.C. So, can you talk a little bit about what interactions you had with the congressman?
I mean, yeah. So I only got to see him in action for around the past year. So I definitely don't have that same deep well of history with him. But it's clear that the man, more than just about anyone else in the New Jersey congressional delegation, he was his own guy. Everyone knew exactly where they stood with him. And that was going to be what it was. And I think that both Democrats and Republicans kind of appreciated that about him. I know that since we were talking about Paterson, I know that there was a North Carolina congressman, I think, a couple of decades ago, who they were doing some interview together, and the North Carolina congressman was like, "Well, you're from New Jersey, so you know all about corruption." And Pascrell went off. He said, "That's not what we're going to do here. That's not how we're going to talk about Jersey. That's not how we're going to talk about Patterson. That's not what we're going to do." And he went so hard that the North Carolina congressman felt compelled to go and apologize to him afterwards. Say, that's not really not what I meant here. That's not how I want our relationship to be. So that was him. That was a fighter for New Jersey. That was, he had the policies he had, and you might disagree with them or agree with them, but he was going to back this state up, whether it killed him or not. Like, we know he was going to do that.
Right, right. Now, Michael, let me go back to you. I want to go back to your time when you were press secretary for Governor Jim McGreevey, and I'm trying to get my timelines correct here. Can you talk a little bit about that working relationship that you had with him during that time?
Oh yeah, well so you have to remember that this is the district that that Bob Rowe once represented, and Bob Rowe was a great champion for New Jersey's transportation infrastructure because it was so important to that district and that area. And Pascrell really took that mantle and ran with it. So as I was at DOT, and then when I was in the front office, this was the guy you went to when you needed federal funds for the new bridge or for the federal, for the highway program for the next year. This was the guy you wanted fighting for you, and he was very proud to say that he was bringing home the bacon. He made no apologies for that. Cities are expensive things to run, and the federal government is a source to help them run. And so he was in Congress. He knew why he was in Congress. He was in Congress to make these great old cities run, and that was who he was. He was one of those great old lions of the House. And as you've all said, he made no apologies for who he was.
Yeah. Now, David, had he stayed in, he was still on the ballot, obviously, there's been quite, a cascade of events that's happened since then. But he was set to become the oldest member of the House. Before he passed away, he was the second oldest. So can you talk a little bit about, his impact there and what you think perhaps his legacy will be?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the fact that he was going to be the oldest member of the House, that was something he took a lot of pride in. He was sort of excited about that prospect, and he liked staying around. He used to refer to himself as a late bloomer. He didn't, he'd been active. He first ran for the state assembly in 1971. He didn't get there till 1987. He described himself as a late bloomer. And so he felt sort of an obligation to compress everything. He didn't know how much time he was going to have in that office. Remember, he was when he first won the seat, he beat an incumbent. That was a swing district the first time he ran. So he compacted everything in. But his legacy is just his authenticity. That's what I think everybody's going to remember. The voting records, they come and they go, and bills that you sponsored, after a while, they all sort of morph together. But what people are going to remember about Bill Pascrell, I think forever, is just that he was just a real Jersey guy. He was old school. And old school in a really good way. He understood constituent service. He wasn't afraid of anybody. He wasn't afraid of Donald Trump. He wasn't afraid of Ticketmaster. In what was a years long battle to stop people from getting ripped off by huge prices for resale of concert tickets. The guy was scrappy, and 87 years old. I'm not that much younger, but I'm a generation younger, and I would not have wanted to meet Bill Pascrell in a dark alley. Even as recently as a month ago, the guy was tough, and if he believed in something, he put the full force of everything he had behind getting what he needed done, and that's what I'm going to remember about him. And I think that's just what this is a sort of a the last of that era of just the old time Jersey Pols. Remember, he was a county chairman. He was one of and I won't bore you with all the details, but one of the stories that I always liked is he was in his early 30s. He was getting involved in politics, and he started showing up at political meetings, and there was an old time party boss, cigar stomping. I think if he stood up straight, he was 5 foot tall. A county, state senator named Anthony Grassi, and Pascrell was not afraid of him. And he took him on, and he sort of wore Grassi down to the point where this old time boss said, "You know what? I'm going to bring him into the club before he knocks me out." And that was just what I liked about Pascrell is there was a perseverance to him. He never gave up. He never quit. And I say this with respect and with admiration. This is exactly how he wanted to go, was as a member of the United States House of Representatives.
And Joey, Mike, any of you can actually jump in. When I reading about it, when I heard about it, and maybe it's me, but I kept reminding myself he was 87, but he never came off as 87. He's 3 years from being 90 years old, but yet, that word, that feistiness, he still had that fire and energy. He was not sick a long time. He was in and out of the hospital over the past month or so. But, I just wanted to get your all's thoughts on that spark and that vigor that he brought to Washington, D.C.
I mean, when you think about who kept up the case against the January 6th, the folks who were prosecuted, it was he who was doing that. He never let you forget, right? He was just fearless, no matter who the opponent was. If it was HBO and The Sopranos for years, you talk about how fiercely he was protective of New Jersey and Italian Americans. If there was a line that that was a little bit off color, got out of line, he let them know that. He was the conscience for that entire time of New Jersey, maybe our most prominent moment there. He was not afraid to let anybody know in any way, and as you've all said, this is exactly how we wanted to go. In fact, with the other recent House vacancy we've had with Congressman Payne, there was a lot of gingerness and tenderness about when people were going to come out and say that they were interested in running. The timing here didn't allow that. We had less than a week for the party to decide who they were going to replace him with on the ballot, and people were afraid, am I paying enough respect to the family? But you know what? I guarantee you that Bill Pascrell would have said, just get in there, do what it takes, and win. Don't worry about any of that stuff. Just win this damn thing.
Yeah, get on with it. Get on with it.
Yeah.
New Jersey is in a unique spot. So we have 3 open seats, Bill Pascrell, and also you just mentioned Micah, Donald Payne Jr., who passed away back in April. Andy Kim's seat's going to be vacated, but you also have Bob Menendez, who resigned as of August 20th. So can you all, and maybe Joey, will go to you first here. Can you just talk a little bit about, this massive change, from this time a year ago to where we are now, how we're really seeing such a huge change in New Jersey's delegation, what will be represented in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, I mean, this has clearly been, and sort of famously been, a year of massive upheaval for New Jersey's congressional delegation. I arrived in D.C. as the New Jersey Globe's D.C. reporter last July. I had a couple of kind of quiet months on the job. And then September of 2023, Bob Menendez got indicted. And my job has been kind of nonstop since, because there has just been endless stuff. And I think that some people, right at the beginning of this sort of total meltdown of the cycle, thought that there would be even more turnover than there has been. Ultimately, the Bob Menendez indictment, it's meaning that he's getting replaced by Andy Kim, and it's meaning that Andy Kim is likely, although not certain, to be replaced by Herb Conaway. These other 2 pieces of turnover that we've got from Payne's seat and from Pascrell's seat, that's just unfortunate tragedy, more so than anything in particular in the water this year. But it means that you're going to have a fair number of new faces in New Jersey come 2025 or sooner this year. You're going to have Andy Kim. You're going to have Herb Conaway. You're probably going to have, or you're almost certainly going to have LaMonica McIver in Payne's seat. And she is particularly interesting. She is, I believe, 38 right now, which means that, she's getting this safe Democratic seat. We're seeing how long these politicians can stay in office. If she stays till she's as old as Bill Pascrell, she'll be there for 50 years. That would probably be enough to make her Dean of the House, Speaker, House Committee Chair, something like that. So we're sort of witnessing an Andy Kim arriving in the Senate at age, I forget exactly how old he is, 41, 42. Another potential long career there. Yeah. So, this year is a year of upheaval in and of itself, but it's also, especially with the two of them, this year of potentially of the beginning of something very long and very sort of definitive in New Jersey political history. When I'm 60 and 70 and whatever, and looking at New Jersey's congressional delegation, are the people who are being elected this year and who made their names this year, are they the ones who feel like they're the definitive New Jersey politicians?
Right. Micah, David, would you like to weigh in on that? Because the way these districts are drawn, they're relatively safe once you were in. I mean, we have some competitive ones coming up. 7th Congressional District, where Tom Kean Jr. is. And we can talk a little bit about debates that we're going to be participating in coming up for those competitive districts. But do you care to talk a little bit about that and how the process works in New Jersey? For Donald Payne, there was time to have a special election. With Congressman Bill Pascrell, there was a week before they had to get somebody's name on the ballot to make it for the general election. Micah or David, do you care to comment on that?
Just very quickly, you brought up a really excellent point when you talked about the maps, because one of the standards that our map makers use is continuity of representation. And we almost elevate that to an art form in New Jersey. And so we really have had this extreme example of continuity of representation in some of these districts. 27 years is a long time. And so our House delegation has kind of looked the same year after year, right? And, for one thing, I can't remember a time when, and maybe David, you'll correct me, but when our when our total congressional delegation should be 14, and it's actually 11 right now until George Helmy can get sworn in, right? And so that's one thing. But this delegation will look very different. It will look much more representative of New Jersey, of our diversity.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody from Hudson County this week about what their congressional delegation is going to look like. And look, the Senate race not over. Andy Kim is the favorite, so we're talking in terms of Kim, but you don't make a guarantee on that. But if Kim wins, from the Hudson County point of view, none of the candidates who stepped up to replace Bill Pascrell are white. Representing a district that has been covered only by white men since the founding of the nation. That's a big change, and that includes parts of Hudson. So Hudson's going to have Cory Booker, maybe Andy Kim, Rob Menendez, who's Hispanic, LaMonica McIver, a black woman, and the second woman to represent Hudson County in the Congress, and what you'll have with Billy Prempa, no matter who the Republican candidate, no matter how wins the 9th district, it's going to be a person of color, and so nobody in Hudson County is going to be represented in Washington by a white man, and that is an entire delegation of people of color. That's a big change for New Jersey, and you start looking at gender. I mean, New Jersey's never had more than 2 women in the delegation at the same time. LaMonica McIver is almost certain to win. That brings it to 3. There's we'll see what happens in the Tom Kean Sue Altman race, but you've got a lot of turnover, and this delegation is starting to look more like New Jersey, and I think that's I think that's just a significant point to mark.
Yeah.
Go
ahead,
Laura, David. David, you'll have to your mind will start going as soon as I say this, but I think Congressman Norcross, after all this, may be the only white congressman in the state to represent one of the state's major urban areas. Right? You've got Bonnie Watson Coleman, who represents Trenton. So as you hop around, and of course we have to decide what we classify as a city. But when you think about our urban areas, when you think of people. Uh, the Italian American congressmen and the white congressmen who've represented our cities for so long over the last 75, 100 years, that really is coming to an end here for the first time.
David?
Well, and again, you're right, because it depends on how you define a city. And Mike, I don't want to embarrass you, but Jeff Van Drew representing Atlantic City, Bridgeton, and Vineland.
Did I say
Vineland is
major
a
city? Did I say? Did I
Yeah.
say major city? Major urban area, I think I even said, right? Didn't I say
Urban
that?
area. Yeah, but look, I mean, this is all part of the change, and which what we talked about earlier about how quickly everything came together. With Bell Pascrell. I mean, just it's important to note, that so much of this comes from New Jersey election laws, which are written, where it's almost like every law you can find another law that contradicts it, and they set these calendars. It's rigid. I mean, had Congressman Pascrell passed away this week, today, that they still would have had to have a nominee in place by the 29th. There was, at one point at the end, it was 3 days between the day of the vacancy and the day of picking a replacement candidate. And, just to put it into perspective, because I find this sort of amazing, people spend years and millions of dollars to win a seat in the U.S. Congress, and here you're talking about as short a runway as I have ever seen, and practically no money involved. This is literally a free shot at a congressional seat.
I mean, and this is the thing about covering New Jersey politics. I'm going to go back because we're at the 20-year anniversary of Jim McGreevey resigning. I was just starting my maternity leave, and I'm so upset. I'm like, I can't believe this has happened. I'm missing the biggest story. Yet New Jersey, it seems to continue to outdo itself with more and more. Well, can you believe this? You had 5 governors in 1 week. You have, U.S. Senator when Bob Torricelli dropped out. There's so many things that continues to outdo itself, and we as reporters and the populace in New Jersey, they get a real lesson in looking at how unique New Jersey's Constitution is, and all the quirks and things that make it unique. And again, with the New Jersey's governor being, one of the most powerful in the United States, he had Phil Murphy had the power, to appoint. He could have appointed himself to fill Bob Menendez's seat. So you never know what's going to happen in New Jersey. And I feel like, we're constantly having to go back and wait, let me check the state's constitution and see what this says, because one news story is more unbelievable than the next. Would you agree? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, we don't have a ton of time left, but we've done quite a bit together, and coming up this fall, we're going to be having some debates. We've been trying to keep the voters informed of candidates, getting them to meet the candidates, and we've got one coming up for the U.S. Senate. We've got Curtis Bashaw, the Republican, and Andy Kim. So, do you all have any thoughts? Going into the fall, once we're starting to pick up steam, what kind of exchange that we might see from the two? New Jersey is a very blue state, but again, you never know what's going to happen. Thoughts on those upcoming debates and what we can maybe expect for the fall. I will go to David. Go to you first, David.
Yeah, I mean, debates are hugely important, and I wish there were more of them. But so we will all be together again for the first debate for the U.S. Senate race, and the first debate in one of the most closely watched House races in the country, which is Tom King Jr. and Sue Altman. And sadly, and we will come full circle, but while before I knew that Bill Pascrell was returning to the hospital, we sent an invitation to do a debate between Congressman Pascrell and Billy Prempa. I'm hoping that now that the nomination is decided, that that's an open seat, and that we'll have a chance to do that again also.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up on this, Joey, final thoughts on looking to the fall. And again, what we thought was going to be on the ballot is very different than 6 months ago.
Yeah, a lot of voters will have new names on their ballot. Everyone in the state will have a new name on their ballot for Senate, Andy Kim, I guess, except for his current constituents in Congress. I think as we sort of look at the next couple of months of campaigning, the thing that, the post Labor Day campaign sprint always brings is a little bit of a put up or shut up time for candidates and parties, where we as journalists and the most plugged in of voters have been paying attention to these races for a long time. But it's only now that the vast majority of the electorate really starts to tune in and starts to look at what's happening. And it's only now that outside groups, outside party groups, outside issue groups start spending on races, start showing their hand, start showing what they're capable of doing.
David, Joey, Micah, thank you all so much for coming on, for recapping this, and I know you all will be back again. So thank you all.
Thanks, Laura.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
And that's going to do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.